October 7, 2023. 1,200 Hamas gunmen pour through the barrier separating the Gaza Strip from Israel. They overrun army bases and kill more than 1,000 Israelis.
They took dozens of children, bound them up, burned them, and executed them.
A family of 4 around the breakfast table. The father, his eye gouged out. The mother's breast cut off. The girl's foot amputated. The boy's fingers cut off before they were executed.
These accounts were used to justify an assault on Gaza that has killed at least 31,000 Palestinians, 13,000 of them children.
Finish them. Finish them. Don't ever forget what happened.
8 months ago, since October the 7th, many are still aware of what actually happened on that day. And more importantly, what did not happen. But we were told it happened.
Babies. Their heads cut off. That's what they said. 40 babies, at least, were taken out on gurneys.
Israeli supporters called for a clear end to the Hamas group. Their government officials declared they are fighting against animals in Gaza.
Fighting animals and are acting accordingly.
And many called for an end to Gaza and rebuilding it as their own land.
Land. This is our national land.
Only one thing will mean a victory in this war: when we will be back in the Gaza Strip.
In other words, genocide. And among all these, we've been categorically fed lies, brutal false information that would justify the genocide that is being carried out in Gaza. In this video, we will break down on how it was masterminded by Israel, so you are sanitized in believing that killing of thousands of innocent civilians is the right thing to do.
6 months following the attack, the Gaza Health Ministry reports more than 32,000 Palestinians were killed, the majority women and children.
At 6 a.m., Hamas fighters receive information to gather at the assembly points and were to wait for further instructions. Only then they were given instructions on what needed to be done.
Hamas fighters receive instructions to gather at assembly points. Only then are they given details of the attack.
Even higher Hamas political party officials had no idea of what was about to unfold.
No one of the fighters have an idea about this operation. Up to minutes before the operation, it was so close and very few members of the military leadership and maybe 1 or 2 from the political bureau who were aware about the operation.
At 6:30 a.m., Hamas fighters blew up the apartheid wall, disabled the watchtowers, and crossed into the illegally occupied Palestinian land, which are now under Israeli occupation.
Hamas fighters storm the main crossing point at Erez.
The land where thousands of Palestinians lived prior to the occupation and were forced to move to Gaza. It is noted that they blew up the wall at least at 10 different locations throughout the north and eastern areas. They blew up the watchtowers and disabled the security system quite easily, I must say. And they entered Israel from sea too. Thousands of rockets are fired into Israeli territory, and under that cover, paragliders flew over the wall. It was a well-coordinated attack. Now, they broke Israel's first line of defense without much loss. They then went on to attack the Israeli military base. Even Hamas officials were surprised at how easy it was to breach the Israeli military bases. Hamas had Israeli kibbutz at their mercy. Now, in short, kibbutz are the settlements in Israel. Generally, each kibbutz has 100 to 1,000 people living. They entered these kibbutz and killed hundreds of unarmed residents. However, something very unfortunate was about to happen, and even Hamas fighters were not aware of it. Only a few kilometers away, there was a music festival full of hundreds of Israeli civilians. Nevertheless, they attacked the innocent civilians and killed hundreds of them, and took around 240 hostages with them back to Gaza. It is clear that Hamas's Al-Qassam brigade led the attack. However, it is reported that at least 5 other groups were a part of this attack. As per BBC report, here are their names: Abu Ali Mustafa Brigade, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, Omar Al-Qasim Forces, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Mujahideen Brigades. Tell me, did you know this? A critical point to note here though, Al-Qassam led the attack and also masterminded the same. Other brigades weren't even aware of what was going to happen until early morning of October the 7th. Now, it is clear that Hamas and other groups killed hundreds of civilians and captured 240 hostages. It is clear that it was a brutal attack on Israeli governance and on Israeli people. To say Hamas did not kill innocent civilians is obviously a lie. We should not say that. However, we should also not say what Hamas did not do. Let's take a look at how this poison is fed to us. As per the investigative unit of Al Jazeera, at least 1,154 people were killed. Out of them, 256 were soldiers, 53 were police and security guards, 63 were civilian security guards, and 782 were unarmed civilians. Honestly, it is quite unfortunate that it had to happen this way for the world to take notice of the plight of Gazan people. However, that is not what news broadcasted in the immediate aftermath of the event. What they said was 40 beheaded babies, raped women, charred bodies, mutilated children. No babies were killed where this report came from. And yet, the Western media parroted the agenda from Israelis. Even the President of the United States went on record to say this.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children.
And then later, the White House clarified he had not seen these photographs. An Israeli Army Colonel Golan Wash said there were 8 babies burned by Hamas. No babies were found. Also, the people who were burned because of Israeli army and its tanks firing upon them and not Hamas.
This house were another 15 burned people, among them 8 babies in this corner. They were concentrated them, and they killed them, and they burned them. Well, did you see? I evacuated.
The list of the dead shows that there were no babies in the house. And Colonel Vach does not tell journalists that the casualties are almost certainly caused by Israeli forces.
I can go on and on about this, but as we have found out now, none of this is true. It was a false propaganda spread across news outlets in Israel and was blindly picked up by Western and European media at face value. But the question is why? As it turns out, even that was a mastermind. Let's listen to this expert.
So how, as Israel, do you create that balance in sort of saying, well, what we're doing is morally right, even though we're killing way more people? Well, you have to emphasize the brutality, because you can't say, well, we've killed less than Hamas. So how do you do it? Well, you try to make the significance of those individual deaths even more disgusting and objectionable. If you can activate people's sense of disgust, I think they're more likely to support, for example, dire retribution against Palestinians.
United Nations released a report recently that stated at least 14 Israeli hostages were in fact killed by Israeli army itself. I request you to research on one particular topic, that is Hannibal Directive. If you want me to make a separate video on it, I will do that. Write down in the comments. It is one of the most brutal things that Israeli army does. Those that were charred, many of them turned out to be Hamas fighters. The narrative always begins on October 7th. However, history of Gazan siege and their oppression does not. In order to answer the question why October 7th happened, you need to know the history of Gaza of 16 years. No, you don't need to know everything since 1948, just the last 16 years of siege. And I request you to watch this part carefully, because if you know this, you will have the knowledge of what actually happened for the last 16 years and why October 7th was predicted decades ago. And don't worry, I will break it down for you so it's very, very easy to understand. But listen carefully. In 2007, Hamas came to power in Gaza through elections. And as per Israel, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Even though Benjamin Netanyahu allowed funding to Hamas through Qatar, many news outlets and newspapers even say he ensured funding continued, as he was of the opinion Hamas needed to be supported. Ever wonder why? Allow me to explain the logic. Hamas is a banned terrorist group. If it comes to power, Israel gets unconditional backing of the international community, Israel can now put complete siege in the name of self-defense, which it did. Did the world oppose? No. Israel can now control everything that goes in and comes out of Gaza. The world stayed quiet. Israel can set up watchtowers and shoot people who get close to the wall, even civilians. The world stayed quiet. Israel controls fuel, water, air, sea from all three sides. The world does not oppose. Basically, they now had free hand to do whatever they wanted to do with the people of Gaza, and that is exactly what happened. Anyway, people of Gaza were living under dire circumstances, and Israel with no accountability for killing people in broad daylight. And the only reason it needs to give? We were targeting Hamas, and the world stops questioning. Do you get the gist now? In 2018 and 19, people of Gaza every Friday peacefully protested to be free from the siege for 2 years. Israel shot people through snipers. The world looked the other way. Israel killed journalists. The world looked the other way. Every way of approaching it through peace was tried by the people of Gaza. What was left to do now to get the attention of the world? To be clear, I do not support what happened on October 7th. Any civilian life is precious and should not be taken. But when you listen to the other side, they were left with no option. Let me explain this with another short example. Forget Gaza for a moment. Do you know what is happening in West Bank as we are now focused on Gaza? No, right? Exactly my point. They are suffering. Hundreds of children have been killed in the West Bank just after October the 7th. Did you know this? Has the world taken notice? Do you see this in the news actively? Do you see Piers Morgan inviting parents of those children who have been butchered in West Bank and expresses sympathy? Exactly. That is why people around felt something big was going to happen, and it did. If you like this video, please watch this video on how Gaza was formed, and do share this video with friends. Assalamu alaikum.